You've done everything right. You drink enough water. You don't hold it in. You follow every piece of advice your doctor gave you. And the infections keep coming back, month after month. Sometimes more often than that. Another burning sensation you recognize before it even fully arrives. Another prescription. Another week of your life lost to something you were supposed to have solved by now. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, quietly, privately, in the way women carry things they don't say out loud, you started wondering if there is something wrong with you. If you are doing something wrong that nobody can see. It isn't. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not doing anything wrong. The reason this keeps happening has nothing to do with hygiene or hydration or anything you have failed to do. It has to do with something that happened to your body. A biological shift that most doctors never fully explain. And today, that changes. I used to follow the standard protocol, treat the infection, advise on hygiene, send the patient home, until I started noticing a pattern I couldn't ignore. The same women back in my clinic, 3 months later, 6 months later, every one of them having followed every instruction perfectly. That's when I stopped treating the infection and started asking why it kept happening. And what I found changed the way I practice. I think of a woman I'll call Diane. Late 60s, 7 infections in 18 months, 3 doctors, 7 courses of antibiotics, and every single time she left with the same instructions she was already following. And then there was Frances, a woman who had stopped making travel plans entirely because she no longer trusted her own body to give her a full day. That is not a urinary tract problem. That is a life being quietly taken apart. Here's what most doctors don't have time to explain, and what changes everything about why this keeps happening to you. My name is Dr. Sophie Martin. I'm a urologist with over 20 years in clinical practice. And today I'm going to give you the real reason this keeps happening to senior women after menopause. And the treatment most women are never offered but should be. Think of a garden that has always been healthy. The right soil. The right pH. A living, balanced environment that naturally repels pests, not because it is fighting them, but because the conditions simply don't allow them to take hold. Now change the chemistry of that soil. Nothing in the garden did anything wrong. But what it once repelled effortlessly, it can no longer hold back. That is exactly what happens to the urinary tract after menopause. Here is what changes and why. Estrogen receptors line the bladder wall. Without estrogen, that lining thins. It becomes more permeable, more easily irritated, more easily infected. The vaginal microbiome, specifically the Lactobacillus bacteria that maintain the acidic environment, hostile to harmful bacteria, declines sharply. The protective pH shifts. The door opens. The urethra itself shortens and loses surrounding tissue, making it easier for bacteria to travel upward. And the tissue of the vagina and urethra begins to thin, dry, and lose elasticity. Doctors call this genitourinary syndrome of menopause, GSM. It affects between 50 and 84% of postmenopausal women. Most have never heard those 3 words. Research published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that postmenopausal women are significantly more likely to experience repeat infections than premenopausal women, and that addressing the hormonal deficit directly reduces that risk by 50 to 75%. The variable that determines whether you keep getting these infections is not how carefully you manage hygiene. It is whether your urinary tract has the hormonal environment it needs to defend itself. And unlike age, that variable is something we can address. Now, here is what the standard treatment gets wrong and why you keep ending up back at the doctor's office. The advice you have been given, drink more water, urinate after intimacy, wipe correctly, that advice is not wrong, but it cannot solve a biological problem on its own. Antibiotics kill the current infection. They do not restore the bladder lining. They do not restore the vaginal microbiome. They do not address the estrogen deficit that made the infection possible. The conditions that allowed bacteria in remained completely unchanged. And with every course of antibiotics, the Lactobacillus population, your body's natural defense, is disrupted further. In some women, repeated treatment actively worsens the very conditions causing the infections to return. That is not your fault. That is a gap in what you were offered. How many courses of antibiotics have you taken in the last 2 years? Tell me in the comments, because that number belongs to a conversation you should have been given a long time ago. The real reason you keep getting these infections is genitourinary syndrome of menopause, GSM. It is not rare. It is not a fringe diagnosis. It affects the majority of postmenopausal women. And it is the single most underaddressed condition in senior women's urological health. It has a name, it has a mechanism, and it has a treatment. That treatment is local vaginal estrogen therapy. And before you stop me, this is not systemic hormone replacement therapy. It is not the estrogen associated with cardiovascular or cancer risk. Local vaginal estrogen is applied directly to vaginal tissue in very low doses. It is absorbed locally. It does not significantly enter the bloodstream. It does not carry the same risk profile. That distinction is one every woman deserves to understand. The research is clear. A landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that local vaginal estrogen reduces the rate of repeat infections in postmenopausal women by 50 to 75%. It rebuilds the bladder lining. It restores the protective microbiome. It addresses the root cause, not just the symptom. It is available as a cream, a ring, or a small suppository, all by prescription, all applied locally, all worth discussing with your doctor. One important note: local vaginal estrogen is not appropriate for every woman, particularly those with a history of certain hormone-sensitive conditions. If that applies to you, this conversation becomes more important, not less. Bring your full history. Ask for an answer tailored to it. Had you ever been offered this before today? Specifically for UTI prevention, not menopausal symptoms? Tell me in the comments. Because in my experience, most women haven't. Here's exactly what to do with everything I have just told you. Write this down. First, make an appointment specifically to discuss your recurrent infections. Not to treat the current one, to address the pattern. Use these exact words with your doctor. I want to discuss whether genitourinary syndrome of menopause is contributing to my infections and whether local vaginal estrogen therapy is appropriate for me. That sentence alone will tell you a great deal about the conversation you are about to have. Second, ask about D-mannose. It is available without a prescription. It has clinical evidence behind it for UTI prevention, and a doctor who takes your situation seriously will know exactly what it is. Third, and this is the one I want you to remember, if you raise genitourinary syndrome of menopause with your doctor and they seem unfamiliar or dismiss local vaginal estrogen without explanation, seek a second opinion. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for the conversation you should have been offered years ago. I want to take a moment to acknowledge what this has cost you. Not medically, in life. The trip you kept postponing because you could never trust a full week. The dinner you left early. The morning you stopped making plans altogether because your body had started to feel like something you could no longer rely on. That loss is real, and it deserves to be named before we talk about what comes next. Because what comes next is genuinely hopeful. Local vaginal estrogen is one of the most effective preventive interventions in urogynecology, with a safety and tolerability profile appropriate for the vast majority of postmenopausal women. Many women report a significant reduction in infections within 3 to 6 months of beginning treatment. The vaginal microbiome, even after years of disruption, responds to the restoration of the right hormonal environment. The urinary tract of a postmenopausal woman is not broken. It is undersupported. Give it what it lost, and it responds. I have watched women who had 10, 12 infections in a year go 18 months without a single one. Not because they changed what they were doing, because they finally received the treatment that addressed what was actually wrong. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Margaret. She was 69 years old when she first came to see me, 3 years into a pattern of 6 or 7 infections a year. She had seen her GP, a gynecologist, and one other urologist before she found her way to my clinic. She had been told by all of them to drink more water and wipe correctly. She had done both. The infections kept coming. By the time she sat across from me, she had quietly stopped planning the trip to Portugal she had been saving for 2 years, because she no longer trusted her body to give her 2 uninterrupted weeks. That was the first appointment where anyone asked about her menopause history in the context of her infections. When I explained the connection, that her urinary tract had lost the hormonal support it needed to defend itself, she looked at me and said very quietly, "So it was never about what I was doing wrong." 6 months after beginning local vaginal estrogen therapy, Margaret booked Portugal. She sent me a photograph from Lisbon. She was standing in the sun outside a cafe, coffee in hand, grinning. No contingency plan, no backup pharmacy researched, just a woman fully present in her own life again. A recurring infection is not a personal failure, it is a biological signal from a body that is not getting what it needs. And a signal, properly understood, is not a sentence. It is a direction. Your urine culture has your name on it. Every result in your medical file belongs to you, and you have the absolute right to a doctor who explains not just what it says, but why it keeps saying the same thing. You have always deserved that answer. Go get it. If you have been living with this for months or years, and no doctor has ever mentioned genitourinary syndrome of menopause to you, tell me in the comments. Your answer might be the thing that sends another woman to her doctor tomorrow. And if you know someone who has been told for years that she is doing something wrong, share this video with her. She deserves to know that she isn't. Everything I have shared today is based on published clinical research and over 2 decades of patient care. But it is general information, not personal medical advice. Local vaginal estrogen is not appropriate for every woman, including those with certain hormone-sensitive conditions. Bring what you have learned today into a full, honest, unhurried conversation with your own doctor. That conversation, complete, direct, and on your terms, is exactly where your answer begins.